All right, so this video, I think my working title for it is roboticism and relationships. And kind of the dynamic I want to explore here is a trend I see in my own relationships and in a lot of other people's relationships. And here when I use the word relationship, I think a romantic relationship will demonstrate this maybe to the most extreme, most faithfully, but I really do think the same dynamic plays out in relationships of all sorts: friendships, acquaintances, business relationships, parent-child relationships, looser family relationships, things like that. And the general concept here is, I think a lot of relationships, begin with a certain degree of excitement. People call it a honeymoon phase. There's the newness of it, the freshness of it. I think on the bodily level, the body's releasing a lot of, good feeling chemicals to kind of reward the fact that the relationship is happening, encourage the relationship to keep going. The mind tends to be kind of optimistic, a lot of positive, imaginative thinking, or maybe even gets out of thinking altogether and is just enjoying the beauty of the moment and the intimacy and the togetherness. And then, what tends to happen after that is obviously the honeymoon period ends, and then the relationship can enter something kind of like a doldrums or a lull or a flat period. And, I just want to say I'm oversimplifying things tremendously. For one thing, not all relationships follow this arc to any extent, and even this arc is oversimplified. I think in a real relationship there are kind of reflarings of a honeymoon period. To some degree, the honeymoon period never really goes away, so I'm oversimplifying here for the purpose of kind of conceptual clarity and tracing out my dynamic, but the map's not the territory. So the honeymoon period, say, has ended, and now you're in more this middle phase where you may begin to notice that the interactions in the relationship tend to be a little more robotic, a little more formulaic, a little less excited, a little less inspired, a little less joyful. And one of the ways you could tell this will be like if the two people are on a couch or sitting at a table together eating a meal. The roboticism is reflected in the nature of responses to questions or to statements. So whereas before, someone may be telling a story and the listener may drop everything else they're thinking just to hear if he detailed the story right in the beginning. Now, the listeners kind of reverted back to their default setting, the way they are outside of the excitement of a honeymoon period, which is sometimes treating what comes into life, conversations, questions, as a burden or an obligation or an annoyance, because oftentimes what we are is caught up in our own private little storm of thinking. You don't need your phone to be in front of you scrolling through it to be lost in a news feed. We all have news feeds inside of our own mind that we disappear into or cling into. And so as the honeymoon period ends, you're getting more into the middle phases. We tend to revert back to that, and now this other person, this person we love, this person we care about, is essentially dealing with this more robotic and removed and distant version of ourselves. And I point this out not to create any guilt or sense of inadequacy in anyone. Quite the contrary. I do it to invite a point of recognition. I think when we recognize that we're being robotic, and this roboticism, it can even apply in your relationship with yourself, right? You could be sitting there and observe things, have things come to mind, and you may just notice you're kind of being dismissive or a little stiff or a little cold, or even if not negative, just a little spare, a little terse, a little empty and uninspired in your responses. And so this, examples would be like if the other person goes, "Oh, hey, honey," and you go, "Yeah? Right? Another common one is I find my mind playing the agree-disagree game. So someone says a statement, "Oh, I think this new study that came out, points out this thing. Isn't that interesting?" And the mind will just kind of instantly go, "Agree or disagree?" And so then the response will be, "Yeah," or "No," right? Or, "Oh yeah, I agree." or yeah, or no, I don't think so, right? And this is so ingrained in our responses, and we think it's courteous and appropriate to the degree that it, seems to answer the person's question, and it does, but only really on that robotic level of, person brought up a point, I am now responding to a point. But we do it sometimes with kind of a coolness or a laissez-faire, or, laissez-faire, nonchalance, I think was what I was going for there. That feels very human and, is human, but it's not soulful. It's not a reflection of a freshness or an excitedness about life or about the relationship that we felt early on, and yet now we find ourselves struggling to feel. And I think the natural habit of the mind is to blame this kind of waning sense of joy or excitement on the relationship itself. But what I want to present is kind of a different framework that actually recognizes this part of the relationship as a blessing, no less so than the honeymoon phase is. And the theory and the thesis is basically this. The whole purpose of life, well, let me back off that a little bit. A significant or major purpose of life is to realize where we are blocked, to realize where we are stuck. And, in my conception of things, that's a stuckness or a blockage in the very spirit of us. And we manifest into life, we incarnate into bodies, and then have these patterns of blockness and stuckness in our very bodies and in our living minds as an invitation for us to recognize where they are and to begin to soften them and let them relax. And the way that work happens is we're in our lives and we just notice that we just keep doing things that we can't seem to stop doing and that don't serve us or don't work for us. And, maybe an obvious or extreme example is if you're, addicted to a harmful substance or to a harmful pattern of behavior. You're gambling all your money away, you're shooting your arm full of heroin, you're, contracting diseases in the process, hurting loved ones, perhaps even harming or killing other people. These are things that obviously our hearts naturally kind of recoil from. And I think that dynamic that we're doing it, we recognize it, we can't stop doing it, and we feel the pain inside of our heart, kind of begging or calling out for mercy. And then there's kind of this confused helplessness of us in the middle. I think this dynamic is really kind of the crossroads or the fork in the road for us as human beings to kind of decide what we want to do. Is life just going to be something we kind of get through and try to manage as well as we can, milk as much pleasure and good memories and experiences and positive stories about ourselves as we can, in the hopes that when we die, we can die at peace and people will say nice things at our funeral and we have a nice legacy behind us and things like that. Which is certainly a fine way to live a life, but also I think misses a potential for something larger. What if, in addition to all those things, we also saw life as an opportunity to massage these knots and blockages in our soul? And so getting back to kind of my main point, if you're noticing roboticism in your relationship, you're noticing you're becoming flatter, your responses are kind of more predictable, right? You're playing that yes-no game, the agree-disagree game, the I like that, I don't like that game. It seems like everything your loved one or your friend says, your responses for the most part are just kind of falling into these flat tracks. You're not even enjoying these conversations anymore. You're almost kind of signaling you don't want to be in them anymore. When this is happening, this is an invitation to go inward. And what I think the most productive method is to recognize that the dynamic with the partner is really just kind of a wink or a pointing toward the inwardness. So we don't go inward and drag our partner in there with us, or drag the relationship in there with us and say, God, what's wrong with this person? Or God, what's wrong with this relationship? Because that kind of misses the whole point. The relationship, one of the blessings of it is this indicator to us. It's this marker, this metaphor, signaling to us, hey, there's something you brought into this life. Some crimping, some coiling, something that's preventing the smooth flow of life through you. Something that's making you kind of get stiff and tight and flat. And this is your opportunity to go in and to address it. And if we're ever addressing the external thing, which in this example is the relationship, then we're missing the point, and we're working in an area that's not going to result in any real gains or change. And so I think there's a bit of a multi-step move here. So first, we see the flat response in the relationship, and if we're going to be really good to ourselves, we begin there with gratitude. Gratitude to ourselves for the recognition, gratitude to the other person and to the relationship for serving as this kind of mirror, showing us where this blockage is. And then the intention we have going into ourselves as we kind of feel in, maybe even close our eyes if we can, take a breath. The intention is to feel into wherever the disturbance or the clogging or the blocking or the tightness or the soreness is within us. Because these patterns of behavior outside of ourselves that we know don't reflect our true self, our true, present, inspired, motivated self. Anytime that's happening, that's a reflection of that blockage in the body, which is itself a reflection of the blockage in the spirit. So you take it step by step, you recognize the pattern in our behavior. We then move in and try to feel the pattern in the body. And again, with more practice, this becomes easier and more effective. In my experience, when I feel in, a lot of the places I feel blockage tend to be kind of in my rib cage, sometimes kind of in my upper chest area. I'll get significant blockage around my Adam's apple in my throat. I'll feel it kind of in my brow ridge and kind of the lower orbitals of my face. Sometimes I'll feel it running down my leg and into my foot. I mean, you know, the energy kind of moves in all different directions, but the energy we're feeling for here is an energy of a painfulness, but not a painfulness of the kind you feel when, you know, you're burnt or you're poked or you're stabbed or something like that happens. It's pain, but you know it as an emotional pain because you realize it's localized somewhere in the body, but not reflective of an injury in the body. It may just be somewhere that we've shoved it to kind of keep it out of our minds so we can keep living the life and the story we want to, while that inconvenient truth of the pain keeps getting in the way. Boom, shove it down, shove it down, shove it down. Here we're talking about doing the reverse of that. Here we're talking about reversing that process. We recognize the pattern in our life that just seems off, doesn't really seem like our true inspired self. We feel into the physical pain in the body, reflecting the blocked feelings we have. We remember, right, and recognize that this blocked feeling in the body, right, this pain, this tightness, this pinching, this pulsing, it can manifest a bunch of different ways, reflects a pattern of blockage in our spirit. And we can then remember, hopefully with some degree of healthy pride, and again with more gratitude, that what we're doing in this very moment, when we are triangulating our lived experience with our felt experience, with our spiritual experience, right? When we have all three of those kind of in an alignment, when they're kind of like lined up like three bodies in a solar system, like three lenses that click together and let a single beam of light through, this is when we're able to do the deep, deep spiritual healing work that satisfies the soul and that really speaks to the purpose of what life is. And I don't want to oversell it. It's not always a pleasant experience. It's not a unicorns and rainbows or transcendent or rapturous experience all the time. Like a lot of good things in life, there's a lot of perspiration that goes in alongside the inspiration. And not every bit of it is pleasant. Not every bit of it is fun. You're not going to be able to look back at every episode of it and get, you know, satisfaction out of it that's going to feel like it balances the scale of the pain. Sometimes you'll go into this and you'll feel a bunch of pain, and then, you know, your alarm will go off, or the phone will ring, or the door, you know, someone will knock at the door, and, you know, you'll end the process you're doing to go to attend to that. And as you're going to attend to it, the body will naturally, or the mind will do an evaluation and say, okay, well, was that worth it? What did I get out of it? What I just encourage you to do is to see this as a life's work, and in fact, the work of many lifetimes, and it will bear fruit, and it will bear pleasure and satisfaction as part of the process. But the more we can not try to force ourselves into evaluation early on, and the less we hold it to some kind of standard or expectation, the more calm and focused in it we can be, and the less stressed and caught up about it we can be. So as we go into that feeling space, We're feeling that kind of stiffness, that blockage, that pain, that pulsing, that pinching. I've talked in a lot of other videos about this, right? It's kind of becoming my mantra. This is what we want to do, is cultivate a calm, open presence. And, you know, easier said than done. It's something you get a lot better at with practice. And you'll see some days you have your fastball, some days you don't. But more and more, the vibe I'm getting as to what's most effective is something that is attentive and non-attaching. Something that's aware of what's happening, right? Feeling what's happening, but not imposing an agenda on it. Not trying to be a hero and push things along. You're trying to bring as much of your awareness and knowingness to it while doing as little gripping or squeezing as forcing as possible. And here are two kind of frameworks I've been working with that I think help with this. The first is to imagine it's a child that's in distress and it's crying. And you are the loving parent of this child. And you want this child to find its way back to peace. But being the loving parent you are and being in no hurry, what you want to do is you want to teach the child the skill of self-soothing. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to be with the child and you're going to attend to the child. But you're not going to speak to it. You're not going to force it along. You're not going to subtly kind of look at your watch, right? Or kind of look over your shoulder to signal to the child that you have better things to do. And if the child would just please hurry up, that'd be nice. Or you're not going to look into the child and project yourself onto it, sentimentalize things. What we want to do is kind of create a space and a vibe around that child and for that child, so that child feels like it has the permission and the confidence and the space to do the healing work itself, to experiment, to try different things out so that it can resolve that pain within it. And then that inner child now has the double gift. The gift in the immediate sense of feeling some relief and some release for its pain, and the greater gift, the gift in the deeper sense of learning this skill, this valuable skill of self-soothing and self-release. And so if the vibe we have is less of, I'm trying to get rid of my pain, I'm trying to fix this pain, I'm trying to extract this pain like a thorn, or I'm going to try to, you know, work this pain out like a masseuse, and in 45 minutes I'm going to work it out, I'm going to get deep tissue, I'm going to do all that. The less we can do that, and the more we can kind of be there with it as it unfolds itself. See the pain as something that's trying to unfold itself, but just really needs the right atmosphere to do so. And the hustle and bustle of life is not the atmosphere for it to happen, because our attention is too diffuse and our intentions are too all over the place. But if we can keep a calm and focused attention here, right, on the here and now, and here feeling that feeling, and if we can have a spaciousness and a calmness and a singleness to our intention of healing, right, and a non-insistent, non-urgent healing vibe, then that's how the magic can happen. I think kind of a related framing, which really is kind of the same framing but just in a different lens, is that we want to try to create the space where awareness and recognition can work their magic, right? So one way of thinking is to kind of rack our brain, go into the brainstorm, start grasping after answers, start grasping after solutions. You might call that kind of an active, assertive way of thinking. Another way of thinking is a more contemplative way of thinking, which is to slow everything down, deliberately kind of defocus our awareness off of concepts and particular propositions, and get ourselves into kind of a soft state where the mind, instead of feeling like a screen on which all these ideas and concepts are appearing, begins to bubble and feels more like a lens. And in that lens, that kind of unbroken field of awareness, the true gift of our intelligence, which is our recognition, is then able to operate smoothly. And I think of recognition kind of like an eagle's eye. And you can imagine if an eagle had a perfect view from its cliff on a perch, and if the sky was cloudless, right, then it could sit in that perch and imagine it's got a nice full belly, right? It's got all the water it needs. It knows its chicks are fine. It has no worldly concerns at all. right? No sense of, okay, well, in this amount of time, I'm going to need to snap back into being a busy bird, right? It could just sit in its nest, open the aperture of its awareness, and allow its recognition, which is its recognition of patterns in that field of awareness, allow that recognition to operate on its own time, unhurried and unbound. This is, I think, the space and the mindset in which the deep unraveling of these blockages occurs, the deep healing occurs. Because, well, you know, if you're being lectured to, talked to, if ideas and concepts and modes are being shoved down your throat, you're either going to be scrambling to take it all in, or you're going to kind of feel overwhelmed. None of this creates a peaceful, calm vibe, and none of this allows for you to really be surprised. If instead you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to think of my mind as kind of this eagle's eye, and I want to create as calm and clear of a sky as I can for this eagle's eye to operate, then that's what I'm going to do. And, you know, a little pitfall here is you're not some kind of god with a broom that's going around and sweeping out all the clouds and driving away all the distractions. You create this with the calmness that you manifest within yourself. In other words, this clear, calm sky, free of clouds, free of occlusions, becomes kind of the metaphor, the dream that comes out of the vibe that you're creating within. And so I think the common theme here in this awareness recognition and in the inner child is that you're not really doing anything directly toward the tangle, right? You're not going in like a Boy Scout trying to unknot it. You're not the helicopter parent trying to fix the child's problems so you can get back to whatever you're doing. You're not trying to throw a fish or a mouse up to the eagle or try to teach the eagle what it's supposed to see. You're actually more of kind of the director, and all you're doing is creating a scene and then backing away and letting the magic happen. And if you have any intentionality at all, it's simply to just re-imbue this scene, reconnect this scene with that vibe you're looking for. And so, kind of tying it back to the big picture here of this video, roboticism and relationships, what I encourage you to do is, you know, when you're feeling that 7-year itch in a romantic relationship, when you feel like any relationship, any friendship, any parent-child relationship, anything is getting stale, burdensome, or difficult, or if you're just recognizing that you're not showing up in the relationship the way you'd like to, as best as you can, see this as a gift. And it's not going to feel like it, but if you can look at it from this other perspective, that it's an invitation to go inward and to do some deep inner healing work that really speaks to your spirit and soul's purpose, then you can, I think, connect with this idea of what a soulmate is, right? Because a soulmate isn't just someone who makes you feel blissful all the time, isn't just someone who keeps you wrapped up in the ecstasy of romantic love or friendship all the time. It's, I believe, someone who, you know, does provide those things for sure, but maybe one of the deeper gifts they give us is being that mirror to ourselves that lets us spot within us those hang-ups and those blind spots and those cloggings that we just can't really see any other way. That when we're kind of in the habits of our own mind, we maybe have kind of missed those or just kind of gloss over them without appreciating it. And so it's us not showing up in our relationships in a way we know we can, that we can either see, right, the fork in the road is, okay, externalize it, right, have resentment, see it, oh, it's that person's fault, it's the relationship's problem, or take the wiser approach, this is my opportunity, go within, do my healing work, triangulate how I'm showing up with how I'm feeling, with how my spirit, right, and the spirit level beyond is shaped. And if I can do skillful work on inner healing here, I am allowing my spirit on a very deep level to heal. And what do you know? The more healing we do here, then in our relationship, we'll see ourselves manifesting more in the way we like, bringing our more loving, true, creative, and inspired self into it. And I think one of the things you'll see, and one of the things you can already notice actually, is when you're the real you in your relationship, when your heart is fully open and you're fully present, I think what you'll see is you tend to be more receptive and resourceful, right? I'm going to kind of go off an R theme here. your partner says something, you don't treat it as a burden or an insult or an impingement on something you were focused on. You're receptive to what they say. Right? There's a little bit of a gladness that this person has come back into your life. And whatever they say is greeted with a receptivity. Ah, how can I help? How can I learn? How can I hear? And then the other R here is the resourcefulness. And so you receive, you hear, and if you have something that is going to be truly helpful to your partner in response, you have the resourcefulness to do it. You might say, well, that reminds me of something I heard here. Or, oh, that similar issue happened with me, and here's how it happened here. And that doesn't mean we're trying to be Mr. or Mr. Fix-It in our relationship. Just that if we do see an opportunity to help our partner, we have that inner resourcefulness to go to, and we see ourselves relying on it, right? That's when the heart's open. We're receptive, we're resourceful. If we're more robotic, reactive, reflexive, that's an indication that the heart is closing, the mind is stiffening, and we're resorting to these responses to try to have it both ways, right? To try to, respond to the partner so that we're not ignoring them, but then also to try to kind of stay attached to whatever is inside, whatever kind of private blockage or private hang-up we're dealing with at the time. And so the arising in the relationship of the receptivity and resourcefulness, gratitude, I can tell my heart's open. The arising in the relationship of the roboticism, the reactivity, the reflexiveness, right? If we're skilled and we're lucky, thank you. This is a cue to do some inner work, maybe now or later. But let me see if, at least right now, can I at least feel in? Can I at least try to feel somewhere in my body where the blockage that is causing this roboticism, this reactivity, this reflexiveness, can I feel in my body where it is? And then if we have more time, boom, try to channel that vibe, that inner child vibe, that awareness and recognition vibe. And if we can also have that deeper awareness and remindingness that we're serving our spirit by doing this, right? We're doing this, the healing work, which is a major part of what our spirit came here to do. And we're actually serving our relationship by doing this, because by doing that healing work, we unstiffen our mind and open our heart. Wow, all of a sudden, something that was kind of a bummer, the way we were showing up, can become both a source of healing and inspiration in the relationship, and a source of gratitude and inspiration in the moment.